welcome back to Channel 11 News. Today, the court case of Worcester versus Georgia continued, the judge hearing the argument of Worcester. This whole conflict has been brewing since the Georgia government began to use its power over the Cherokee to take away Indian land. Retaliation came in the form of the formation of a Cherokee nation, which made Georgia unable to remove the Indians without their consent. Georgia, in turn, began to place numerous laws that restricted the government of the Cherokee Nation, getting rid of their courts and laws and continuing to take away more land. However, the Indians saw these as intrusions and took the state to court in 1831, claiming what Georgia was doing was unconstitutional, which has proven to be an important piece of evidence because of its confirmation of the sovereignty of the Cherokee Nation as the case has developed. Worcester became involved in the conflict when he was stationed to serve as a missionary in the Cherokee Nation. He became an influential part of the movement to throw off Georgia binding. Seeing the threat he presented, the state took measure to get rid of him. They made it illegal for a white man to reside in the Cherokee Nation without consent of the Georgia government, a concept which Worcester saw as absurd and refused to follow. This refusal resulted in his arrest 3 times, the final one being the trial that sentenced him to hard labor for 4 years. However, the case was taken to the Supreme Court when the legitimacy of the ruling was questioned. The case now continues, and more than 4 years of a man's life is now at stake. The well-being of a whole nation of Indians is at risk, and the Constitution itself is in question at the presence of this trial.
All rise before Chief Justice John Marshall.
You may be seated. On today's date of February 20th, 1832, we are here to argue the case Samuel A. Worcester versus Georgia. Will the plaintiff please rise and state your case?
Thank you, Your Honor. I, Samuel Worcester, have been wrongly accused and jailed for breaking a law established by the Georgia government. This law is unconstitutional as it conflicts with U.S. Cherokee treaties as well as the Contract and Commerce Clause of the Constitution. Georgia has no authority within the Cherokee Nation, and it certainly does not have authority to throw a missionary like myself into a penitentiary for 4 years, forced to do hard labor. And for what? Because I didn't obtain a license signed by the governor? Well, those are sovereign Cherokee lands, and the state of Georgia does not have the right to enact and pass laws upon the territory.
Will the defendant stand and state your case?
Thank you, Your Honor. Georgia feels as though Mr. Worcester has trespassed on our Indian reservations due to the fact that he has defied our law prohibiting any white man from living in Cherokee territory by refusing to obtain any license. The Cherokee lands are a part of our territory, and we have the right to enact our laws onto any who reside in our state boundaries.
Objection, Your Honor! The United States government has signed several treaties of sovereignty with the Cherokee Nation. I turn your attention to the Treaty of Hopewell, Article 3, which states, "Said Indians for themselves and their respective tribes and towns do acknowledge all the Cherokees to be under the protection of the United States of America, and of no other sovereign whosoever." Furthermore, Judge Marshall himself ruled just 1 year prior that the Cherokee Nation is in fact a domestic dependent nation. While we are not a foreign power, we are our own sovereign nation that cannot be smothered by the land of Georgia, who only seeks to take over the land we inhabit. However, the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8 states that Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states, and with the Indian tribes, showing that the Cherokee Nation is neither a state nor a foreign power, but still a nation of itself. This proves that Congress is the only legislative body with authority over it, and the state of Georgia cannot, I repeat, cannot force its power over the Cherokee. Thank you.
Please stand and hear the ruling of Chief Justice John Marshall.
I rule in favor of Worcester. The Cherokee Nation is a distinct community occupying its own territory, and Georgia does not have the authority to mandate laws within the territory confined by the Cherokee Nation. Worcester has legally lived within the Cherokee boundaries by virtue of facts that the Cherokee Nation is a nation within itself. Therefore, the acts established by the state of Georgia that affect the lands of the Cherokee are unconstitutional and now deemed void.
This concludes our special report of the Worcester versus Georgia trial. The real question is, what will be the effect of Chief Justice John Marshall's decision? Today marks the 20th anniversary of the ruling in the Worcester versus Georgia case. While the Cherokees did gain a victory with the guarantee of their sovereignty, we now see it was not enough to save them from the greedy hands that continually grabbed for its land. Georgia ignored the ruling, pressing on for the removal of the Indians, which culminated in 1838 to the Trail of Tears, which saw the forced removal of almost all of the Cherokees in the land and moved them to Oklahoma. The ruling of John Marshall may not have achieved the ultimate goal of the Indian leaders, but it did have a positive impact on the aspect of other Indian nations. This case ruled that Indian nations were in fact sovereign, which, while it didn't go much for the Cherokee Nation in Georgia, set a precedent for others. It also addressed the forced seizure of Worcester and the unjust actions of Georgia towards him while he was arrested. This was a guarantee for the preservation of due process, an important right for all citizens that retain their rights under the jurisdiction of the Constitution. From Channel 11 News, this is Megan Bowling. Thank you and have a good evening.
No, please, just leave.
Oh wait, where was I from?
Any white man from living.
Objection, Your Honor!
However, the Indians don't do that! Stop.
Cherokee people, Cherokee tribe.